What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in. This week, we're going to talk about probably the most well-known Marvel US original character, Straxus, the Decepticon Lord of Darkmount. Straxus was created by Bob Budianski and drawn by Don Perlin to serve as the main bad guy in issues 17 and 18 of the original Marvel Transformers comic. The story saw a shifting focus away from Earth and catching up with what was going on over on Cybertron. It turns out, things were bad. Straxus and his cronies, who also consisted of the 85 Decepticon Seekers and the Insecticons to help sell toys, had taken over the city-state of Polyhex, or the entire planet according to the UK stuff, and had ruled it with an iron fist as Blaster, Perceptor, and a resistance cell made up of the 1985 minibots and an ill-fated original character named Scrounge tried to survive and take him down before he could send reinforcements back to Earth. As a character, Straxus was sort of a one-note horrible villain, but he did it with a loud, cheesy flair, and even in the pages of a Baroque 80s comic, managed to come across as hammy and larger-than-life in a way that endeared him to readers. It's me, I'm readers. Those two issues would be his only appearances in the US comic, but he'd go on to cause problems in the Marvel UK stories, including a body-swapping scheme involving Megatron that led to a weird, gigantic retcon that I just won't get into here. Since then, he's never made the leap to animation, but has continued to have little roles, mostly cameos, in other Transformers comics, trading on how strangely memorable his turn in Budianski's writing was. On the merchandise side of things, he surprisingly already got a figure clear back in 2010's Transformersgeneration's toy line, and one that was a fully original tooling too. But it was a tiny little deluxe and arguably really didn't communicate the grandeur his character needs. And since then, all he's gotten is a couple of repaints here and there. So this new version from the Transformersgeneration's comic edition line is very welcome. Even if it was kind of hard for a Canadian to get, I had to order him off the America-only Hasbro Pulse site with shipping and exchange since the whole line wasn't carried by Canadian retailers. This figure itself may be a retool of Kingdom Galvatron, and as we'll get into, but that was actually a smart choice for him. A lot's been changed from Galvatron here. By my unofficial count, we're looking at new lower legs, a new pelvic plate, a new chest, new forearms and the thingies hanging off of them, a new backpack, and a new head. Importantly, it's enough to make him scan as a new character, not as a Galvatron with a new head. See, Kingdom's Galvatron's proportions always felt kind of off to me when it came to representing the character. He was too wide, he was too stumpy, too barrel-chested, but all of those things do work for Straxus and his booming, larger-than-life personality, so now, in the toy, they've become strengths. When it comes to source material accuracy, it's a finicky thing, because Straxus didn't really have a proper character model drawn up, and was always kinda just a bit sketchy, literally. But I will say this guy's a bit of a mismatch proportionally. Straxus, as depicted in the Marvel Comics, had a huge head with bulbous limbs, whereas this guy's got just the big torso and everything else is just kind of regular sized. But hey, this guy has to transform, unlike the comic book villain, so that's all forgivable, especially since he still communicates size and mass exactly the way he is. For specific details, the new torso, it looks right with its upside-down Legend of Zelda Triforces and central cockpit, thingy. We are talking about a Cybertronian mode here. The limbs, even with the retooling, are all less accurate, but again, the comic was very sketchy, so this all feels correct. One thing I've done in every photo here is intentionally mistransform his shoulder pylons by splaying them out, instead of pointing them vertically, because it's a Galvatron-only detail, and flattening them out makes them less obvious. Plus, it means he actually has some peripheral vision. That new head, despite being a lot smaller than his comics version, is excellently sculpted and leans into the weirdness of this design, where it's kind of a cobra hood mask. Without any kind of face or eyes underneath of it, just a metallic neck like there isn't even a person in there. The big problem that I have with the sculpt, though, is the things hanging off of his arms. They were tank treads on Galvatron, and they've been retooled into boxy, techy things here. They stick out way more than on Galvatron and often feel like they're in the way. They're new parts, so I wonder if they could have just been removable or something and turned into extra guns for him, as the sculpting on the front does vaguely represent weaponry to me. The colors on Straxus are another thing that you really can't judge on accuracy, because they kept changing from issue to issue, sometimes panel to panel within the issue in the original comic. There was some blue, some red, silver, and sometimes even yellow. This is a non-yellow version, angling more towards how he appeared in issue 1. So he's deep navy blue, deep red, and a silvery gray with accents of black. It's all very straightforward except for the comic edition paint on him. That's a gimmick of this subline, a kind of special paint job that's meant to represent inking, shading, and coloring from the old-fashioned comic book pages. On Straxus, this mostly translates into black paint into various spots on him, imitating shading. It's often asymmetrical, like on his forearms and on his legs. This kind of odd paintwork isn't usually something I'm fond of, and I think it looks bad on some of the other figures in this line. But it's subtle enough here to look good in my opinion. It helps that a lot of the shading on Straxus, like the black on his head sculpt and under his pecs, is often where shadows would naturally cast on this figure in real life. So it feels more like a trick of the lighting than something artificial. He's also got a pattern of Ben-Day dots, i.e. the old comic book coloring, on his pecs and knees, but again, it's subtle enough not to feel like a natural part of his deco. Granted, it is a bit damning that I keep coming back to, this thing I don't like and is subtle enough not to bother me, when it's supposed to be a selling point, but it is what it is, and what it is a good looking figure. In terms of build quality, like I mentioned above, Straxus feels generously dense and chunky in your hands, making you forget his short for a later height. He stands really well too, thanks to generous heel spurs. The only fiddly part on him is those dang arm-mounted thingies that they just don't stay in place, and they love to get flung around as you pose them around. Speaking of that, Straxus is very posable. He feels like his shortness means that he's got money spent on the joints. So he's got a lot of little extras like ankle and wrist swivels and double elbows. Straxus does not feel like he should be bendy, but he is. The only real issue is his waist is blocked from moving very much by his backpack. There is a weirdly specific issue I have though. His arms aren't flexible enough for him to double hand his accessory, and he should be able to because he's prominently doing that a lot in his comic appearances, including the cover of the comic that's used on his packaging. But to be fair, they'd need an entirely new tooling built around making that pose happen to pull it off, because most Transformers cannot do that with their own accessories. Speaking of accessories, Straxus has got way less accessories than Galvatron. While there's less stuff overall that he could come with, Galvatron straight up made some of his accessories up, so it is a bit of a drag to see less stuff here. In terms of what is here though, Straxus has got his famous pickaxe, which looks appropriately mean. Its appearance, again, was never consistent in the comic, but I will say that it feels way too small. That thing should be larger and meaner. At least his wrist swivels mean he can spin, dip, and slice it very effectively, even if it's on kind of the puny side. His other accessories was invented for this release, and it's a little round blue cannon with a slice of that painted on black shading through the middle of it. He can hold that cannon in his hand, and it reminds me of some hand cannon for some big game hunting, which matches the character's vibes. One awkward thing about it though is that the barrel is too big for blast effects, so you have to find one that you can awkwardly cram in there. He can also mount the cannon on 5mm posts on his upper arms, left over from Galvatron, and he's got an additional set of ports under his feet, making him feel less accessory compatible than he ought to be. He can also store one of those accessories on his back, or the other, but not at the same time. Like I said with Galvatron, this guy transforms. Apparently on Galvatron, this complicated transformation was to facilitate a quirk of the animation model where the torso changes color, the pursuit of which is part of the same tuner perversion school of engineering that netted us the Origin figures, which to be clear, I really liked. On Straxus, this just means he has a strangely long, involved transformation for no clear reason. But here's the thing, it's a really fun transformation, where it's never unclear what you need to do. It just has like 7 million steps to it. There's all these moments where you think things aren't going to lock in, only to discover little pegs and holes that you didn't realize were there. So it's a lot, but it's very fun and very friendly. Not like the drudgery of, say, an overcomplicated masterpiece or a particularly bad third-party figure. So this is half the reason why he's a Galvatron retool. You might take a look at this Space Cannon alternate mode and go, well, they just kept Galvatron's alternate mode. But here's the thing, Straxus changed into this in the comic. That's right, a year before Galvatron even existed, Straxus just happened to also change into a flying space cannon. And as far as I know, no one making the comic knew that next year's Big Bad would have the same alt mode. So it's seemingly a big cosmic coincidence. And a lot of this retooling, including the little pods and the new cannon, are imitating specific comic details, making the whole thing even more impressive. My favorite little trick here is how his pickaxe stashes on top of him, and fins splay upward to imitate specific details on the Marvel design. It almost makes the undersized accessory worth it. Another funny consequence of the retooling is that he's lower to the ground than Galvatron, thanks to his rear leg only being able to descend diagonally to the ground instead of vertically, like on Galvatron. So his whole shape is just a little bit different. This mode also makes some of his comic edition shading make good visual sense by having the black deco on both his legs and the cannon along a similar horizontal line. I think this guy's kind of a lateral move from Galvatron. He's got fewer accessories and features, but a lot of clever retooling and a presentation that generally feels more lush. And to be clear, Galvatron was a very good figure, so a lateral move means that this guy's good too. As Straxus, this is absolutely the best version of him we've ever gotten, and it feels like he really captures the inherent bombast of the character, that loud, hammy attitude that led to his one-note bad guy to become so well-liked, and it makes it all worth it to me.